Welcome back to Community Conversations. I'm your host, Steve Mantis, and my guest today is Moffat Makuto, who is the Executive Director of the Regional Multicultural Youth Council. So Moffat, we kind of saw your own kind of journey ending up here in the 70s and finally settling in 85 and focusing on helping youth become successful in the future from a variety of backgrounds. Was that the beginning stage of the Youth Council, the Multicultural Youth Council?
Yes, I think it was really more like the expansion of the Youth Council, because at that time too, Northwestern Ontario doesn't have too many new immigrants coming to settle here. Yes, you have pockets of them, and we do provide services to educate the local indigenous people on what to do when you welcome newcomers to make them stay, and then help the new immigrants also on how to work with the system. But one thing when we're working with youth is just the natural thing that a lot of First Nations young people were coming from reserves to come to high school, not just university and college at that time, and it still happens today. And most of them had never really been out of their communities. And the challenges they were facing were very similar to the challenges I also faced when I came from Africa. Luckily, I had, like I said, sister and brother-in-law who sponsored me and helped me to navigate the winters and everything. But what we find that a lot of the First Nations didn't have that support network. The parents were still back home on the reserves, and the young people were being billeted in the community. And as we now started to say, okay, we come from different paths and we are going to work it for a common future, we started realizing a lot of them were dropping out of school and in their own country kind of stuff. And when we were discussing with them that the issues like loneliness became in, they didn't really have in those urban life skills to see how to survive in an urban environment. A few of them were a few grades behind in education and needed a lot more catching up. And one thing that really struck us was the whole issue of racism. I could understand people like myself coming from apartheid or segregated Rhodesia at the time to hear that people were very welcoming and talking about multiculturalism and diversity and equity and respect, all these really important values that in my own country when I grew up I could not vote because I was black. But in Canada I automatically became a citizen and I could vote, and you are excited with that. But when it came to dealing with First Nations, we slowly started to realize they were very marginalized, whether it was because of the Indian Act or the historical issues with treaties. But the end result is that most of them were not making it in the mainstream. So we started to try and bridge those gaps. And I always remember very well with the young people I work with, like Mary Jean Cormier, who is now working with the CBC Radio, or Bobby Narcis, who is the Director of Social Services with Anishinaabe Ask Nation, that we were trying to have this little multicultural traveling show. And we really wanted to have a team thing. And we said, well, what are things we could do? Yes, I can do an African dance, someone can do a Spanish dance, but we wanted something to show we are a common future. And we said, why not sing a little nursery rhyme like, are you sleeping, Brother John? It's in there. In French, it's what, Frère Jacques or something like that. And that's almost a universal, because the kids from South America could sing it in Spanish. We had some Chinese students who could sing it in Mandarin. Of course, the French had it and English had it, and even Africans could sing it in Swahili. But when we were asking native youth to say, you come on the stage with us, this is the multicultural, they couldn't sing it in Ojibwe or Cree. And we were saying, how come most of them could not speak the language? And it really hit us. And they said, you guys have to go back to do your homework if you want to be on stage with us as part of this group. And it really resonated with a lot of First Nations who were saying, you guys, what you are doing with our youth makes us so proud, because many of them had been embarrassed or were teased for trying to speak their language as a foreign language. We wanted to be them to be proud of our heritage, because like they kept on reminding us that, they are really scared of multiculturalism. That is it another way of assimilating indigenous people. And I remember some elders saying that, if people like me, Moffat, you lose your African language, it's still back there in Africa, you can go and get it. If some Chinese young people lose their Mandarin, it's still there in China. But if native youth lose their language, it becomes extinct. So we really want our kids to hold on to something that identifies them with the land, and language is important. Now you are making them sing with you and go on stage and people are clapping for them. It really makes a difference. And I think that was one way our group really built strong bridges with the First Nations. Then from then on, we were now addressing that issue of how do we help them to stay in school and succeed like everyone else. If it's loneliness, how can we be friends with them? If they are struggling with schoolwork, how can some of us be mentors? Because there are students who are gifted in certain things. We can all be a resource to each other. And that's how this network kind of really developed, that we now focused on programming for young people. Yes, we have parents who come here as immigrants and they are looking for those bigger opportunities. But we know young people just go along with their parents. They don't have to decide they want to come to Canada or whatever. They go along. And many of them are forgotten when it comes to integration. And our group became that rallying point of getting young people, whether you were indigenous, you were from Africa, black, you are Chinese, you were white, you were from whatever. We welcomed everyone because that's the Canada of the future. And that's how it all started working.
Well, it's inspiring, but so simple on one level. It sounds simple because it's so rational and reasonable in terms of how you've come to those places. So you and I have kind of crossed paths many times over the years.
Yes.
And most recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, it has been in the area of community development and neighborhood development.
Yes.
How does that fit in? Is it as people grow up, then this is the next stage, or how do you see that?
Well, it was really in another journey transition because our youth council is based around Victoriaville Mall there. So we used to have our meetings and our activities, and the members came from different neighborhoods and would pick them up or give them bus passes to come and participate. And it was really interesting. But then as more come, you realize I can't take 20 kids from Limbrick or Windsor or this neighborhood to come to our events. The numbers just became a little bigger. Then we said, why not have little youth councils in these places so that they can plan and organize activities? Yes, we can have some of the leaders from this group still come to strategize and plan and share ideas, but they don't have to come to our meetings for activities. We can organize activities in the neighborhood. And that's how we started trying to develop that capacity that young people in Windsor could organize their own activities, just like we were doing with the Youth Council. And that's how the neighborhood program developed. But then as we were doing it, I didn't mean to intervene. If you want to say.
We just have to take another break.
Oh, okay.
But please stay with us because we'll find out really how these youth have moved back into their own neighborhoods.
Okay.
Please stay with us.